Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I've got the Canon 400mm f4.do version 2 lens that I want to review for you guys. This thing is an absolutely amazing lens. I've used this a lot this last week to shoot high school and softball games. We are just finishing up with the high school season here in Southern California, so I got to shoot the championship games and the playoff games with this thing, and it did very well. Because I've been so busy with that, I have not had a lot of chances to get out and use this for anything other than sports, but I did take some pictures of some birds and things like that on my way home and in my backyard. I am aware that none of those are award-winning shots, but I just wanted to show you guys something besides pictures of baseball and softball. So let's start off by talking about size and weight. This thing is very well known for being small and lightweight. It looks relatively big here because of the lens hood, but once you realize that about a third of the length of this thing is the lens hood, you realize that this thing is very small and it is extremely lightweight. I was able to handhold this thing for hours. I have it on a monopod here just to make it easier for me right now, but I was able to shoot with this thing pretty much all day without a monopod. I probably took about 90% of my shots handheld. I very rarely put this on a monopod. It does get heavy after a day of shooting, but it is more than manageable. The image quality coming out of this lens is top notch. I was able to nail some very, very sharp images, and one of the great things about it is I was able to do it consistently. The autofocus speed and accuracy on this are just absolutely amazing, especially when you have a lot of light. When I was outside shooting on a sunny day, seriously, I was getting a ridiculous amount of tack sharp images, virtually no dropped frames, no out of focus shots. And it was just able to lock on autofocus very quickly, whether the subjects were coming towards me, away from me, side to side. It didn't matter, it performed very well. Now, when the lighting was getting a little dim, whenever it was heavily overcast, late in the afternoon, things like that, I did get a little bit of a more inconsistent performance, but I was still very, very pleased. It was still better than just about any other lens that I've ever shot with in terms of consistency. The one thing that I was a little bit disappointed in using this lens was using it with the teleconverter. I used it a lot with the Canon version 3 1.4 teleconverter, and with the teleconverter on, I saw a significant drop in the consistency and in the autofocus speed. I dropped a lot of frames, and well, when I say a lot, I don't mean to a level that was unacceptable. It's just that when you use this lens, you get to a point to where, I mean, you're just hitting almost 100% of your shots, tack sharp, in focus, great shots. And so when I put on the teleconverter, I was expecting to get something at least close to that. And although, again, it was an acceptable rate of out of focus shots, it still did perform noticeably slower, and there was a big drop off in the consistency level with the 1.4 teleconverter. The other thing that I noticed with this lens was whenever I shot it using the old Canon 7D, I also got some inconsistency with it, especially using the 1.4 teleconverter. It was extremely inconsistent on the old Canon 7D. I shot this mostly using the 5D Mark III, and it was just ridiculous how consistent the shots were. Like I said, the more light, the more consistent it was. But even in the lower light situations, and even with the teleconverter, it was not at an unacceptable rate. The other thing that I really liked about this, the first couple of days that I had this, I shot it with the teleconverter about half the baseball or softball games to allow me to get some really distant shots of the outfielders and things like that. And what I began to realize was, one, whenever you're shooting at 400mm and you throw a teleconverter on there, you're at, I don't know, 500 and whatever it comes out to be, 560 I think it is. You know, you kind of limit yourself on the shots that you can take. So what I kind of found was this lens is so sharp that I actually ended up shooting most of the time without the teleconverter after a few days, because I realized that it's so sharp I can just crop, and I really didn't mind even cropping heavily because the image quality coming out of this thing was so amazing. One of the other things about this lens that people make a big deal about is the image stabilization. I've said it before, because I shoot a lot of sports, that's primarily what I want telephoto lenses for. I usually use fast shutter speeds, so image stabilization is not a big deal to me, but I often play around with it just to see how well it works. And although it does work well on this, I was actually kind of surprised, because with the Canon 100 to 400 version 2, I was able to shoot handheld at some very, very low shutter speeds and still consistently get tack sharp images. With this, I wasn't able to get nearly as low of a shutter speed and get tack sharp images. I would say for me, and this was completely non-scientific, this was just me standing in my front yard at night snapping some pictures of street signs and stuff, but for me to consistently get tack sharp images, I had to be about an 80th to 100th of a second shutter speed. Now, I know a lot of that has to do with the fact that I use sloppy shooting technique and stuff like that, but with the Canon 100 to 400, I was able to get significantly lower than that and get consistent tack sharp images. Now, I was able to shoot at slower shutter speeds than an 80th or 100th and get tack sharp images, but it wasn't 100% of the time. And for me, I don't want to shoot at a shutter speed that's so slow that I even run the risk of getting camera shake in there. So for me, it's the lowest level I'll shoot at is where I know 100% of the time I can get a tack sharp image. Now granted, this is 400 millimeters, so if you can get down at 100, 200th of a second, in my opinion, you're doing pretty good. But like I said, for me, the image stabilization is not a big deal anyways. Even if this thing didn't have it, it would not be a deal killer for me at all, because I'm shooting sports, and with this being an f4 lens, you know, I'm hoping to be at like 1,000th of a second on a bright sunny day anyway, so the IS really doesn't make that big of a deal to me. So overall, amazing lens, amazing performance, extremely fast autofocus, very accurate, especially in well-lit situations. It does drop a little bit as you get into your lower light situations, but still very accurate and very consistent. It did struggle, like I said, a little bit with the Canon 1.4 teleconverter. One other thing I want to mention, I ended up using a Sigma 1.4 teleconverter on this, and I was kind of to me it was interesting because I saw absolutely no difference in image quality or autofocus speed between using the Canon and the Sigma teleconverter. I kind of thought that the Canon version 3 kind of expensive 1.4 teleconverter would perform better on a Canon lens than the Sigma, but that was not the case. They performed exactly the same in my opinion. So, but anyways, overall, I absolutely recommend this lens for anybody who's going to be shooting in well-lit situations, or somebody who needs a lightweight lens that gives you a ton of reach to take around with you. So hopefully that helps you guys out. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave me one below. Thanks for watching.